There are two versions of England. One is the version you already know. The other one sounds made up until you see it. Start in Yorkshire, where a spring pours down a rock face and turns whatever falls into it to solid stone. Leave a hat, and by the time you come back for it, it won't bend anymore. And that's just where it starts. Follow the coast south, and the sea has carved a row of white chalk towers straight out of the cliffs. Towers so old that nobody, not for centuries, has ever agreed on what they're even named after. Keep going, and the ground itself gives way. Down at the bottom of the quarry, trucks big enough to flatten a house look small enough to be toys. And the pit's been growing wider every year for more than a decade. Every one of these has a name. The stranger places don't. Join me and I will show you the real England. "57 million people share this ground, though you'd never guess it from the empty lanes. Off the motorway, it thins into small market towns. Some of these places still run by their own rules. In one Yorkshire town, a single shop has sold sweets since 1827. Sugar boiled in copper pans, pressed into century-old moulds. Only 30 people fit inside, and buyers still fly in from Sydney and China for it. Food still does the talking. Fish handed over hot in paper. In Devon, the cream goes on first under the jam, and nobody argues about it. In Birmingham, a curry called the Balti still comes straight out of the steel bowl it was fried in. On the Sussex coast, one family has held a cottage above the crumbling cliffs for 4 generations. They're not leaving. Most of them wouldn't trade it for anywhere else on earth. And you're about to see why. The Seven Sisters rise and fall along the Sussex coast in a run of white chalk crests. That chalk is built from countless plankton skeletons that sank onto a tropical seabed. No seafront was ever built here, so films borrow these cliffs whenever they need Dover. Dover's cliffs are propped up and going green, while these faces shear off and stay white. Waves take about 2 feet of cliff a year, and far more in a bad storm. A river winds through the park to a shingle beach with no seafront beside it. Cliffs drop to sea level at their eastern end, where houses were built too close. Burling Gap fills a notch in the cliffs where the chalk drops to a stony beach. Its rock is softer than the chalk next door, a gravel of flint and clay. One winter of storms took 7 years of erosion in 2 months. A row of houses once ran along the top, and several came down before the cliff arrived. Owners took the sun lounge and the ice cream parlour off the tea room as well. Steel stairs drop to the beach, where low tide uncovers chalk platforms and rock pools. Losing a house here takes decades, and 4 more wait on the cliff around the corner. The coastguard cottages line a cliff above Cuckmere Haven, white against the chalk behind them. Coastguards once kept watch here, and one family has held a cottage for 4 generations. There is no mains power, so batteries store whatever the solar panels collect. A post-war seawall holds the tide back, though a third of the land below has gone. Government funding for the wall stopped, so the owners raised the money themselves. Erosion costs a family its garden here, and along the Jurassic coast it hands the world new fossils. "95 miles of Dorset and Devon shoreline hold rocks from 3 different eras. UNESCO put the Jurassic coast on its world list in 2001, the only natural site in England. Walking east along the shore passes the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous in order. Cliffs crumble constantly, which is exactly why the fossils keep appearing. Storms loosen the rock and wash out ammonites and the bones of sea reptiles. Collectors comb the shingle after every gale, because one fall can expose a skeleton overnight. Erosion has carved arches, stacks, coves, and hidden shingle bays the whole way along. One arch on this coast took its name from an old word for piercing a hole. Durdle Door arches out of the sea on a spit of Portland limestone. Its name comes from an old word for piercing, and the sea did exactly that. Waves stripped the soft rock behind the limestone and then broke through the wall. That hole is only about 10,000 years old, which is nothing in this rock. Round holes above the arch mark where cycad trees once grew. Stacks off the headland carry farmyard names: the bull, the blind cow, the cow and the calf. One family has owned this piece of coast since the 1640s. The water that pierced this wall also scooped a round bowl at Lulworth Cove. A narrow gap in the outer rock opens into an almost circular bay. It formed when the sea breached a hard band of limestone along the shore. Behind that wall lay soft clays, and the waves hollowed them out in every direction. Chalk at the back of the bay stopped the digging and set the horseshoe shape. Waves bend as they squeeze through the entrance, which curves the beach into an arc. Another cove next door shows the whole process starting again from the beginning. Fossil tree stumps lie east of the water, turn to stone inside the rock. Soft rock loses to the sea every time, and further east the chalk breaks into pillars. Old Harry rocks rise as white chalk pillars off Handfast Point. Waves cut a cave into the headland, then an arch, and then the arch fell in. Chalk once ran unbroken from here to the Isle of Wight in a single ridge. The needles across the water are the far end of that ridge. Melting ice raised the sea and cut the ridge in two. A neighbouring stack called Old Harry's Wife toppled in the 1890s. Some say the name belongs to the devil, others to a pirate out of Poole. Whitestone ends this coastline in the east, and the best fossil hunting waits west. Lyme Regis curls around a bay behind a curving stone harbour wall called the Cove. A girl born here in 1799 survived a lightning strike as a baby. Mary Anning grew up selling fossils out of the cliffs to feed her family. At 12, she dug a skeleton nearly 17 feet long out of the shore. Scientists called it a fish lizard, and her find shook their whole idea of the past. She found the first plesiosaur too, and the papers describing it left her name off. Ammonites still wash out of the cliffs after every heavy storm. Fossils drew scientists to this shore, and a Cornish harbour drew painters for its light instead. St Ives wraps around a harbour on the north coast of Cornwall. Pilchards built the town, and watchmen on the hill shouted whenever a shoal darkened the water. The fishery collapsed, and painters moved into the empty net lofts along the seafront. Light bounces off water on three sides here, which is exactly why they came. Sculptors and potters followed, and the town grew its own school of modern art. Tate opened a gallery above the beach in 1993, facing straight out to the Atlantic. Cobbled lanes still run down between whitewashed cottages to the sand. A white tower on a bare island across the bay marks a reef that swallowed ships. Godrevy Lighthouse holds a small rocky island at the eastern edge of the bay. Under the water lies a reef called the Stones, which wrecked ship after ship. In 1854, a steamer struck it, and everyone aboard was lost. A minister from a nearby town gathered a petition, and the light first burned 5 years later. Keepers worked 2 months on the island and took 1 month off. One girl who summered in the town watched that light from her window every year. Virginia Woolf moved it to Scotland for her novel, but the tower she remembered was this one. Only seals use that island now, and England's oldest chemist shop trades in Knaresborough. Two volunteers share the job of town crier there, calling the news twice a day. The town spills down a gorge above the River Nid, painted houses stacked up the cliff. Castle ruins crown the rock, once the hiding place of the knights who murdered Thomas Becket. Parliament wrecked it after the Civil War, and townspeople carted the stone off for their houses. Market stalls have filled the square every Wednesday since 1310, selling pork pies and Yorkshire cheese. Old recipe books name a Knaresborough picnic pie, ham and whole eggs baked under pastry. A fiddler blinded at 6 grew up to become England's first professional road builder. Gorge quarries raised those castle walls, and later the railway bridge across the river. Knaresborough Viaduct carries the Harrogate Railway over the River Nid on 4 tall arches. Builders had nearly finished the first bridge in 1848 when it dropped into the water. Falling gritstone rumbled for around 5 minutes, loud enough to carry through the town centre. Nobody died, though lime from the mortar dissolved and killed the fish downstream. The wreckage dammed the river and pushed mud through the houses along the bank. No inquiry followed, and blame landed on poor materials, bad workmanship, and heavy rain. Its replacement went up with battlements to match the castle ruins, which sounds absurd and looks right. Water wrecked that bridge, and water in these cliffs turns objects into solid stone. The petrifying well pours down a bulging grey rock face beside the River Nid. Its water climbs a mile underground and arrives loaded with dissolved calcium carbonate. Visitors hang teddy bears and hats in the flow, and a bear hardens within months. A hollow beside it marks the supposed birthplace of Mother Shipton, England's most famous prophetess. People have paid to see that dripping rock since 1630, the oldest paid attraction in England. Curiosity fills this cliff, but the rocks around the Isles of Scilly drew ships to their deaths. Five inhabited islands and hundreds of bare rocks lie 28 miles past the tip of Cornwall. The Gulf Stream keeps frost away, so bulbs open in February while the mainland stays frozen. Flower farms cut the country's earliest daffodils and ship them out by boat and helicopter. One garden on Tresco grows plants from 80 countries outdoors, many bought off passing ships. A Dutch admiral is recorded declaring war on Scilly in 1651, and peace came only in 1986. These rocks have wrecked ships for centuries, and one October night in 1707 they took a fleet. Four warships struck rocks nobody could locate, and at least 1,400 men drowned. That loss pushed Parliament to fund longitude at sea, and Bishop Rock Lighthouse marks the western edge. A granite tower rises straight from a wave-washed ledge at the archipelago's far end. Engineers first bolted iron legs to the rock, and a gale took the tower before it lit. Its stone replacement shook so hard in storms that objects fell off the shelves inside. Record books call it the world's smallest island with a building, and Yorkshire holds a stranger claim. Pateley Bridge climbs a steep grey stone high street above the River Nid in Nidderdale. One shop there has sold sweets since 1827, longer than any other sweet shop on earth. That building began as an apothecary long before its jars filled with boiled sugar. Sweets are still cooked in copper pans and pressed into century-old moulds. Pear drops, humbugs and rhubarb and custards outsell everything modern on the shelves. About 30 people fit inside at once, and buyers fly in from Sydney and China. Farmers close the Dales show season here each September, walking sheep down to the riverside field. The hill above town hides a quarry, and the Coldstones Cut was built on its rim. Two spirals of stone wall wind up Greenhow Hill, higher than any other public artwork in Britain. Sculptor Andrew Sabin spent 3 years on the design, and it opened in 2010. Nothing on the walk up warns anyone about what waits behind the wall. The stonework falls away without warning, and the ground opens into a working quarry. "60-ton trucks crawl across the floor far below, small enough to pass for toys. Earth banks and the shape of the hill hide the pit from the dale below. Diggers pull 600,000 tonnes of crushed limestone out of that hole every year. Yorkshire sells its hills by the ton, and Dorset once blew a fortress off the top of one. Corfe Castle breaks the skyline on a cone of chalk in the Purbeck Hills. William the Conqueror raised one of England's first stone castles on that gap. A teenage king was stabbed at the gate here, and the blame fell on his stepmother. King John hunted the hills nearby and kept his crown jewels behind these walls. One woman held the place through 2 Civil War sieges with a handful of defenders. It fell only when attackers dressed as friends walked in through the gates. Parliament packed the walls with gunpowder, and the towers still lean where they split. Villagers carted the rubble off for their cottages, and a Roman wall once ran clean across England. Hadrian's Wall crosses 73 miles of northern England from one coast to the other. Roman crews built it around the year 122 to close off the empire's edge. Forts, mile castles and turrets broke up the whole length of it. Soldiers came from across the empire, Syria included, to hold a wet hill in Northumberland. Their letters survive in the mud at Vindolanda, including a birthday invitation and a request for beer. The wall runs over black crags, where the ground falls away on the northern side. One dip in that ridge held a single tree, and Sycamore Gap took its name from it. The tree grew alone in a clean hollow between 2 crests of the wall. A Robin Hood film put it on screens worldwide, and photographers came from everywhere. Two men felled it in the dark in 2023, and it crashed down onto the Roman stone. Saplings raised from its wood grow across the country, and a village clings to a Yorkshire cliff gap. Staithes packs red roofs into a ravine, where a beck runs out to the North Sea. Fishermen launched flat-bottomed cobbles straight off the beach, a hull shape borrowed from Viking boats. It grew into one of the biggest fishing ports on this coast, chasing herring and cod. Press gangs raided the village for crews, and Staithes men died at Trafalgar. Crab and lobster still come ashore, and the pub on the quay took its name from the catch. That pub has been rebuilt more than once after the sea came through its windows. A shop boy called James Cook counted change here before he ever saw a ship of his own. Painters came later for the light, and a forest in Hampshire still runs on medieval lore. The New Forest has been old for centuries, cleared as a royal hunting ground in 1079. William the Conqueror wanted deer, and forest law made harming one worth a man's eyesight. Families could not fence their own land, and dogs too big for a measuring stirrup lost toes. Those rules softened into rights, and commoning households still turn their animals loose on open ground. Hundreds of pigs go out each autumn to clear acorns that poison the other stock. Verderers have met at Lyndhurst for centuries, and their court still writes the forest's rules. A stone marks where an arrow killed King William II, and nobody settled who fired it. Another king handed the southern edge to Cistercian monks, and their abbey at Beaulieu grew wealthy. Those monks arrived in 1204 and raised a church longer than an American football field. King John gave them the ground, and one account blames a nightmare about monks he mistreated. Henry VIII's men closed Beaulieu Abbey, pulled the church down, and sold the estate. Villagers were handed the monks' dining hall as a parish church, and services still run there. The Great Gatehouse became a family home, and one family has held it ever since. Wartime instructors trained secret agents here in forgery, housebreaking, and silent killing. A later owner parked 5 cars in his front hall, and that grew into the National Motor Museum. Estate land runs into open heath, where the forest's largest sheet of fresh water lies. Hatchet Pond holds more fresh water than anywhere in the New Forest, and people dug it. Farmers cut marl from the ground to sweet and sour fields, and gravel diggers took the rest. Wartime crews hauled gravel off for a nearby airfield, and water filled the holes behind them. Cattle, donkeys and ponies wade into the shallow margins through the summer to drink. Swimming and boating are banned because the water holds plants found almost nowhere else in England. Medicinal leeches still breed in the weedy northern end, one of their last strongholds in Britain. Anglers work the open water for pike, tench and carp, under a huge unbroken sky. Oak from these woods travelled east to the riverbank, where shipwrights shaped it into warships. Buckler's Hard runs downhill in 2 rows of brick cottages, split by a wide grass strip. A duke laid out that street in the 1720s for a sugar port that never opened. The French seized his Caribbean islands, so the empty village turned to building ships instead. Around 50 warships went down the gravel slipways here, cut from oak felled in the forest. Three of them fought at Trafalgar, including Nelson's favourite ship. Shipwrights took the oaks, but the fallow deer Normans stocked here still browse the regrowth. Spotted coats and broad flat antlers separate them from every other deer in Britain. Those antlers spread like an open hand, and bucks drop the set every spring. Fallow outnumber every other deer here, at roughly 1,300 head on the Crown lands. Romans brought the first ones over, and Norman kings restocked the royal forests with them. Bucks hold traditional rutting grounds through October and call with a groan like a belch. Fights over that ground blind some animals and leave others lame with slashed flanks. A doe leaves the herd to give birth alone and hides her fawn in bracken. Deer scatter into cover at the sight of people, and a tougher grazer holds the lawns. New Forest ponies wander the heaths, greens and unfenced roads with no field holding them. Everyone belongs to a commoner, though they live outside all year and foal in the open. Their grazing keeps the lawns cropped and the heath open, and that shapes the whole forest. Five agisters ride out for the verdurers to check stock and answer road accidents. Riders push the herds into pounds each autumn, and 40 roundups cover every district. Each pony leaves with its tail cut in a pattern showing the marking fee is paid. Ponies have right of way on unfenced roads, and around 100 are hit each year anyway. Grazing held this ground open, and a retreating sea preserved a hilltop town in East Sussex. Rye crowns a low hill above the Sussex marshes, all cobbled lanes and leaning timber houses. As a cinque port, the town owed the crown ships and crews, and it grew wealthy on trade. French raiders burned it down in 1377 and carried the church bells home to Normandy. Men from Rye sailed after them the following year and brought the bells back. Silt choked the harbour and the sea pulled away, which is why these streets still look medieval. Smugglers filled the gap, and the Hawkhurst gang drank at the Mermaid Inn with pistols out. Boats still land rye-bay scallops downriver, and every February the town builds menus around them. Sea trade made this town wealthy, and wool money built whole villages out of honey-coloured stone. The Cotswolds roll across 6 counties in the middle of England. Walls and cottages all come from one seam of golden limestone under the fields. Medieval wool made this one of the wealthiest corners of the country. Merchants spent the profits on enormous churches that still tower over tiny villages. Single Gloucester cheese can only be made here, on farms that keep Gloucester cows. Old spot pork and cheesy Cotswold dumplings fill the menus in the village pubs. Cotswold Morris took its name from here. 6 men in white with bells below the knee. Every village guards its own dances, and one hill above them all carries a fake castle. Broadway Tower crowns the escarpment above its village at over 1,000 feet. It looks like a Saxon fort and is really a Georgian folly from 1798. A countess wondered whether a beacon lit up here would be visible from her house. Her home lay 22 miles off, and the answer turned out to be yes. William Morris took summer holidays inside it, and an antiquarian ran a printing press there. "16 counties are said to be visible from the roof on a clear day. Observers watched for nuclear attack from a bunker below, buried under the greenest farmland in England. Drystone walls stitch the Cotswold landscape together and hold on weight alone. Hidden valleys cut between the hills, each one carrying its own stream. Beechwoods cap the ridges, and open pasture runs down toward the villages. The Stone runs gold in the north, and paler cream toward the south. Walkers cross the whole region on a 100-mile path along the escarpment edge. Skylarks nest in the grass, and buzzards ride the air above the ridges. Grass this good fed the animals that paid for everything, and one heavy fleeced breed cropped it. Sheep have grazed these hills for 1,000 years without a break. The old breed was the Cotswold lion, a tall animal under a heavy golden fleece. Its wool sold across Europe, and made merchants here extraordinarily wealthy. An old line ran that the best wool in Europe was English, and the best English wool Cotswold. Woolmen had sheep and wool sacks carved onto their tombs inside the churches they paid for. That breed nearly vanished when demand collapsed, and rare breed farmers brought it back. Modern flocks are mostly other breeds, though grazing still shapes every field. Flocks work the fields by day, while a white bird hunts that grass after dusk. Barn owls drift over rough grass at dusk, with almost no sound at all. Soft fringes on its wing feathers break up the air and kill the noise. It hunts by ear, and one ear opening is set higher than the other. Uneven ears let it place a mouse in the dark by sound alone. That flat white face works like a dish, funneling every rustle toward those ears. Voles make up most of the diet, and a hunting bird quarters a field in slow passes. Its cry is a screech rather than a hoot, which is why villagers named it the screech owl. Rough field edges keep it fed inland, and further south that grassland ends at a cliff. Beachy Head rises higher than any other chalk sea cliff in Britain. The grass of the South Downs runs right to the edge and stops. Its name is a worn-down version of an old French phrase for beautiful headland. Sailors used the white wall as a marker long before any light was built. Chalk falls over 500 feet to a platform of boulders below. A red and white striped lighthouse went up on that platform in 1902. At the lowest tides, walkers can reach it across the rocks on foot. Sea mist kept hiding the older light on the cliff top, so Bell Toot was switched off. Builders raised it from Aberdeen granite in the 1830s, with walls 6 feet thick. Keepers lit it for 68 years before the newer tower took the job over. A London surgeon later bought the building and added a floor, electricity, and a well. Canadian gunners used the empty shell for target practice during the war. Their shells punched daylight clean through walls that were 6 feet thick. Erosion left the tower a few yards from a 200-foot drop by the 90s. Engineers jacked up 850 tons and slid it back on greased beams. Two days of jacking saved that tower, and a town on the Somerset levels trades in miracles. Glastonbury rises out of the flat Somerset levels, once a marsh cut by open water. Legend says Joseph of Arimathea landed here carrying the cup from the Last Supper. Those wetlands were named as Avalon, and the name may come from an old word for apple. Orchards still ring the town, and Somerset cider is pressed from the fruit each autumn. Apple cake and cheddar turn up on menus the whole length of the high street. Crystal shops, incense and tarot readers fill the shop fronts between the tea rooms. The famous music festival is not even held here, but on a farm several miles away. Every street in town ends looking at a hill with a broken tower on top. Glastonbury Tor climbs over 500 feet straight out of level ground. Seven terraces ring the slope, and nobody has settled what cut them. Farming, ploughing, and a pilgrim maze have all been offered as explanations. St Michael's Tower on the summit is all that survives of a church. An earthquake brought the first church down in the 13th century. Two springs at the foot run different colours, one red with iron and one white. Mist on the levels can make the whole hill appear to float. The last abbot was dragged up here and executed, and Glastonbury Abbey was finished. Broken arches rise out of Parkland, where one of England's greatest monasteries once worked. Only Westminster held more wealth before Henry VIII closed it down. Tradition calls this the oldest Christian foundation anywhere in Britain. Fire gutted the buildings in 1184, and rebuilding needed money the monks did not have. Seven years later, they announced they had found King Arthur's grave in the grounds. Pilgrims and donations poured in, and historians have doubted the timing ever since. The abbot's kitchen survived whole, one of the best preserved medieval kitchens in Europe. Ruins here draw crowds all summer, and a Wiltshire village opens 4 days a year. Imber lies in the middle of Salisbury Plain, 7 miles from the nearest town. On the 1st of November 1943, the villagers were called into the schoolroom. They were given 47 days to leave, so troops could train for the invasion. About 150 people packed up, believing they would be coming back. Nobody came back, and the army has held the village ever since. Shell-scarred cottages open to visitors for a few days a year, and rare birds nest nearby. The stone curlew nests on bare ground in the open country around the plain. It has enormous yellow eyes, which suit a bird that feeds mostly at night. Its call carries across the dark as a thin wailing whistle. Britain lost most of its stone curlews as farming changed through the last century. Salisbury Plain kept them because tanks and shells kept the ploughs away. Grassland here has never been fertilised, sprayed, or turned over. Nests are scrapes in the stony soil, almost impossible to see from a few feet away. These birds leave for Africa each winter, but a moor in the southwest keeps its herds. Exmoor spreads across the border of Somerset and Devon above the Bristol Channel. Heather moorland covers the tops and wooded valleys cut down through it. The moor meets the sea in some of the highest cliffs in England. A Victorian novel set among these valleys made the whole area famous. That book put outlaws in a remote combe, and readers came looking for the place. Farms here are small and scattered, reached by lanes sunk between high banks. It became the first dark sky reserve in Europe, with almost no street lighting. Stars come out over a coast where one dry valley runs beside the sea. The Valley of the Rocks runs parallel to the coast near Linton, with no river in it. Jagged towers of rock rise along both sides above the water. Geologists think a river once ran through here before the sea cut its mouth away. Formations carry names like Castle Rock and the Devil's Cheese Ring. Feral goats have grazed the slopes for generations and climb the cliffs freely. poets walked here 2 centuries ago and wrote the place into their work. Sheer drops fall straight into the sea along the northern side. Rock gives way to heather inland, and Dunkery Beacon tops the whole moor. Nothing on Exmoor or in Somerset rises higher than this rounded heather summit. A Bronze Age cairn of piled stones marks the very top. People burned warning fires up here, which is where the name comes from. The Bristol Channel and the Welsh hills appear on a clear day. Watchers have picked out a hill in Gloucestershire, more than 80 miles off. Heather turns the whole slope purple through the late summer weeks. Stargazers climb it at night because no town light reaches the summit. Something bellows across these valleys every autumn, and the sound carries for miles. Red deer are the largest wild land animal left in Britain. Exmoor holds more of them running free than anywhere else in England. A stag can weigh as much as a small pony and carry heavy branched antlers. Autumn brings the rut, and stags roar until their necks swell and their voices break. Rivals walk side by side first, sizing each other up before anything touches. Fights end with locked antlers and injuries that can kill either animal. Hinds gather around the winner, and calves arrive the following summer. Herds drift down into the woods by daylight, and a wider moor lies further south. Dartmoor is the largest piece of open country left in southern England. Granite bones break through the surface in weathered outcrops across the moor. Bronze Age people farmed here, and their hut circles and stone rows still cover the ground. No part of England holds more prehistoric building in one place. Blanket bog soaks up the rain and feeds the rivers running off every edge. Mist arrives fast, and a detective novel about a spectral hound was set in it. Devon serves its cream tea with clotted cream under the jam, never on top. Almost nothing grows tall up here, and one grove of stunted oaks proves the exception. Wistman's Wood clings to a boulder field above the West Dart River. Its oaks are stunted and bent, growing sideways out of granite blocks. Moss and lichen cover every branch and every stone between them. The whole wood covers only a few acres of the hillside. Antiquarians called it a druid grove, and folklore filled it with hounds and spirits. Water runs off this hillside toward Burrator, where Victorians dammed a valley for a city. A dam went up in the 1890s to carry water down to Plymouth. Engineers flooded a valley on the southwestern edge of the moor. Wooded slopes and granite tors ring the water on every side. Its surface reflects those hills so cleanly that photographers work it year-round. Old walls and water channels from earlier centuries lie along the shoreline. Calm green water lies below the bare moor, rising just above it. The moor climbs away toward a pair of granite domes on the eastern side. Hayter rises in two huge granite outcrops above the eastern moor. Quarrymen cut stone from the rock below it for buildings in the cities. They built a tramway to move it, and the rails were carved from granite. Iron cost too much, so the track itself came out of the quarry. Sections of that granite track still lie in the grass on the down. Cheaper Cornish stone closed those pits, and another quarry filled with water instead. Fogintor Quarry opened around 1800 near the village of Princetown. It's granite-built Princetown itself, and much of what surrounds it. Stone cut from this pit went into Nelson's Column in London. Hundreds of workers live beside the pit in cottages that are ruins now. Cutting stopped early in the last century, and the pit filled with cold, clear water. Sheer rock faces rise around that pool like the walls of a cathedral. The bleakest of the stonework went into Dartmoor prison, a mile down the road. Builders finished it in 1809 to hold French prisoners taken in the Napoleonic Wars. American sailors arrived a few years later during the War of 1812. Thousands were packed into stone blocks on the wettest ground in Devon. It became a convict prison afterwards, with a name for being impossible to escape. Mist closes over those walls for days at a time. Granite holds the moor's edge here, and the Cornish coast keeps a working harbour. Port Isaac drops down a cleft in the cliffs to a harbour full of boats. Whitewashed cottages crowd lanes too narrow and steep for most cars. One alley between two houses narrows to 18 inches at its tightest point. Smugglers used it to slip away from the revenue men. Crab and lobster still land on a quay their families built generations ago. Sandwiches of picked crab sell all day, and a Michelin-starred kitchen works on the harbour. A television doctor with a fear of blood turned this harbour into Portwen. Fishermen here sang shanties into the charts, and a Yorkshire town invented the beach holiday. Scarborough claims to have invented the seaside holiday, and the claim holds up well. A woman found a spring of sour mineral water running out of the cliff in 1626. One doctor published a book on its powers, and the wealthy started arriving. Horse-drawn bathing machines rolled onto the sand so nobody had to undress in public. The railway came in 1845 and turned a spa town into a resort for everybody. Its Grand Hotel opened with 4 towers, 12 floors, and 52 chimneys. An Italian family opened an ice cream parlour by the harbour that has barely changed since. German warships shelled the town in 1914, and Scarborough Castle above took the worst of it. The headland between the two bays has been fortified for 3,000 years. Romans built a signal station up here to watch for raiders from the sea. A great stone keep went up under Henry II in the 12th century. One favourite of Edward II was besieged inside and starved into surrender. Parliament's guns split that keep in half during the Civil War. Half the tower still shows the break, open to the weather on one side. Shells from the sea hit the walls again in 1914. Yorkshire's whole coast opens up from here, and South Bay curves away below. golden sand curves in a long arc beneath the old town. The harbour still lands crab, lobster and whitefish onto the quay. Amusement arcades and chip shops line the front behind the beach. Victorian streets climb the cliff above them in narrow rising tiers. Donkeys have worked these sands for well over a century. A funicular lift carries people up and down the slope to the promenade. Crowds thin out in winter, and the arcades keep their lights on anyway. Yorkshire sends its crowds to the sea, and the mill towns sent theirs to the hills. The Peak District became Britain's first national park in 1951. It lies between Manchester and Sheffield, within reach of millions of people. Pale limestone makes the white peak in the south, cut by clear rivers and dales. Dark gritstone and peat bog make the northern moors bleak and high. Landowners kept walkers off those moors for grouse, so 400 ramblers went up anyway. Five went to prison in 1932, and the right to roam followed from that day. Villages here still dress their wells, pressing flower petals into clay to make pictures. Petal pictures last about a week, while one hill nearby falls apart all year round. Mamtor is called the Shivering Mountain because it keeps sliding downhill. Layers of shale and gritstone soak up water and slip apart under their own weight. Engineers built a main road across the slope and repaired it for 2 centuries. The hill won in 1979, and the road was abandoned where it lay. Cracked tarmac still tilts across the slope in broken steps. An Iron Age hill fort ringed the summit, with ramparts still visible on the grass. Walkers follow the ridge from here, along one of the best paths in the park. That ridge drops on its southern side into a gorge cut between limestone pinnacles. Winnett's Pass squeezes a road through a narrow cleft between towers of limestone. Its name comes from an old phrase for wind gates. The gap funnels the weather so hard that gales roar through it constantly. Geologists think it was a channel between coral reefs in a tropical sea. Those reefs turned to limestone, and the sea drained away entirely. Cars now crawl up a gradient steep enough to stop lorries at the bottom. Ramblers held access rallies inside the pass before the war. Limestone made this valley beautiful, and industry arrived to carry it away by the ton. Hope Cement Works fills the middle of one of the loveliest valleys in England. Its chimney rises higher than anything else for miles around. Quarries have eaten into the hillsides behind it since 1929. It is the largest cement works in the country, and it operates inside a national park. The plant is also the biggest single employer anywhere in the park. Opinion has been split about it for the best part of a century. Trains carry the cement out along a line built for the quarries. Industry took a valley here, and water took 2 whole villages further north. Ladybower Reservoir fills a valley in the upper Derwent, shaped like a letter Y. Engineers flooded the villages of Derwent and Ashopton to build it. Families were moved out, and their houses pulled down before the water rose. Graves were dug up and carried away to higher ground. The church tower was left in place and reappeared in a dry year. Crews blew it up in 1947 after deciding it had become a hazard. Two circular spillways drain the surface like giant plug holes when the water is high. Water pours 80 feet down those shafts, and Derwent Dam holds the valley above. Twin castellated towers rise from a wall of dressed stone across the valley. More than 1,000 workers spent 14 years building this dam and its neighbour. Its shape and setting looked remarkably like the dams of the Ruhr Valley. Bomber crews of 617 Squadron flew here through the spring of 1943. They practiced holding a Lancaster 60 feet above the water in the dark. Weeks later, those crews attacked the German dams for real. Wartime aircraft still fly low over the wall on anniversaries each year. Water leaves this valley for the cities, and a market town downstream sells a famous accident. Bakewell is the biggest market town inside the national park. Honey-coloured buildings crowd the River Wye beside a medieval bridge. Its pudding was supposedly invented by mistake in the 1820s. A cook at an inn is said to have misread the instructions for a tart. She spread egg and almond mixture over the jam instead of stirring it into the pastry. The result sold so well that the mistake was never corrected. Three shops in town each claim to hold the original recipe. Nobody here will call it a tart, and a palace waits a few miles away. Chatsworth House holds a valley of parkland laid out by Capability Brown. The Dukes of Devonshire have lived here for 16 generations. Its staterooms hold paintings, sculpture, and books collected over 4 centuries. A cascade of stone steps carries water down the hillside behind the house. One fountain in the garden can throw water almost 300 feet up. Dukes built their pleasure grounds inland, and a prince built his beside the sea. Brighton grew from a fishing village into the place London went to misbehave. A prince with money and no restraint made it fashionable in the 1780s. Day trippers have poured down from the capital ever since. Narrow lanes behind the front are packed with vintage shops and cafes. Sticks of Brighton rock still sell along the seafront, with the name running through them. Fish and chips and hot donuts come with the pebbles and the wind. Bonfire societies parade in costume every November across this part of Sussex. Nothing here was built to be restrained, and the Royal Pavilion set that standard first. Onion domes and minarets rise over a seafront in southern England. The prince who built it wanted an Indian palace outside and a Chinese one inside. Dragons hold up the chandeliers in a banqueting room lit like a stage. Its kitchen columns were made to look like palm trees with iron leaves. Nothing about the building was useful, and that was entirely the point. Pleasure by the sea was the whole idea, and it moved onto the water within a century. Brighton Palace Pier reaches over a third of a mile out into the channel. It opened in 1899 and has been working ever since. Fairground rides crowd the far end of it, high above open water. Arcades pack the middle with noise, lights and coin machines. The smell along the deck is fish, chips and candy floss. Several million people walk the length of its boards every year. Iron legs underneath take the full weight of the sea. Victorian iron still carries the crowds here, and something taller, further west, lifts them instead. The Brighton I-360 rises as a slender steel column above the seafront. It climbs over 500 feet, higher than anything else in the city. One glass pod rings it and glides slowly to the top. Passengers see the whole city, the Channel, and the South Downs behind. Its designers had already built the London Eye in the capital. Builders raised it where an older pier once met the shore. That older pier is still out there, burnt down to its iron frame. The West Pier opened in 1866 and closed for good in 1975. Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel once performed in its concert hall. Storms tore into the structure through the winter of 2002. Two fires finished it the following spring. Both of them started deliberately. What is left is a black skeleton of ironwork out in the water. Nobody has cleared it away, and the Trust has no plans to. Photographers work it at sunset more than they ever worked the pier itself. Something arrives above that wreck every winter afternoon in enormous numbers. Tens of thousands of starlings gather over the ruined pier as the light goes. They fly as one shape, folding and unfolding across the sky. Each bird tracks only its nearest neighbours, and the pattern comes from that alone. The display can last half an hour before it breaks. Then the whole flock pours down into the ironwork to roost. Crowds gather along the promenade below to watch it happen. Birds pack into that frame for warmth, and dry stone walls divide the hills far north. The Yorkshire Dales run as a series of green valleys between high dark fells. Dry stone walls climb slopes too steep to plough, and stone barns fill the fields. A country vet wrote about these farms and made the whole area famous. Limestone underneath is riddled with caves, potholes and rivers that run below ground. French monks brought a cheese recipe to Wensleydale in the 12th century. Farmers kept making it after the monasteries closed, and it nearly died out anyway. One cartoon inventor and his dog put Wensleydale back on the shelves in the 90s. Farming shaped every valley here, and meltwater shaped one enormous white cliff. Malham Cove curves in a white limestone wall about 300 feet high. Meltwater from the last ice age poured over the lip as a waterfall. The drop was greater than the one at Niagara today. Water later found a route underground and the fall stopped. A pavement of cracked limestone blocks caps the rim above. Peregrine falcons have nested on the face for over 30 years. Climbers work the wall all summer, and a ravine a mile east closes overhead instead. Gordell Scar cuts a ravine so narrow that its walls almost meet above. A waterfall drops through the gap over a lip of soft tufa rock. Geologists think a cave roof collapsed here and left the gorge open. Wordsworth wrote a sonnet about it, and Turner painted it in 1816. Victorian tourists came specifically to be frightened by the place. Walkers can climb the waterfall itself when the flow is low. Limestone does its work below ground here, and Ingleborough rises over the whole system. Its flat summit is visible from most of the Western Dales. It is one of the Yorkshire Three Peaks, walked together in a single day. An Iron Age fort ringed the top, with hut circles still traceable inside. Nobody knows how people lived up there through the winters. Caves and potholes riddle the limestone under the whole hill. One shaft nearby swallows a stream and falls over 300 feet. Cavers are winched down it on open days twice a year. The moor below carries a railway across the bog on 24 stone arches. Ribblehead Viaduct carries the settle to Carlisle Line, high above Batty Moss. Engineers had to sink foundations far into a peat bog to hold it. Around 2,300 navvies built it with picks and shovels. They lived in shanty towns named Belgravia, Sebastopol and Battywife Hole. Accidents, fights and a smallpox outbreak killed more than 100 of them. The railway company paid to extend the churchyard nearby to take the dead. British Rail tried to close the line in the 80s and lost. Trains still cross it every day, and a road east crosses the fells instead. Buttertubs Pass climbs between Wensleydale and Swaledale over open fell. Limestone shafts open straight into the ground beside the tarmac. Farmers taking butter to market are said to have lowered it into them. The cold shafts kept the butter firm on hot days. Some of these holes fall about 60 feet into the dark. Water runs off these fells into the Eure, and the river drops in 3 broad steps. Aysgarth Falls carry the river Eure over 3 broad ledges of limestone. Each fall spreads across the full width of the river rather than dropping in one place. Woodland closes over the water between the 3 of them. Painters and poets came for the water long before the crowds did. A film fight between Robin Hood and Little John was staged in the river here. The falls run hardest after rain, when the ledges vanish under white water. Victorian visitors arrived by train and walked down through the woods. Another Dales River runs past the broken arches of a medieval priory. Bolton Abbey is a ruined priory set in a bend of the River Wharfe. Stepping stones cross the water directly in front of the arches. Augustinian canons lived here for 300 years before the dissolution. Part of the church was kept for the parish and is still used. Turner painted the ruins here and helped make them famous. Upstream, the whole river squeezes into a channel a few feet wide. The water there runs faster than it looks, and warning signs line the bank. This county guards its ruins carefully, and it guards one recipe even harder. Yorkshire pudding is flour, eggs and milk poured into scorching beef fat. That batter hits the fat and erupts into a crisp, hollow shell. It began as food for people who could not afford much meat. Cooks set it under the roasting joint to catch the dripping fat. Families ate it first and on its own, to fill up before the beef appeared. The rule in Yorkshire has always been that a pudding has to rise. Chemists at a national society once ruled 4 inches to be the minimum height. A flat one starts an argument here, and the next river north built a city on coal. Newcastle rises in tiers of pale stone, above a gorge cut by the Tyne. Coal left this port for London for centuries, which gave the language a phrase. Carrying coals to Newcastle has meant wasted effort ever since. Shipyards along the river launched vessels for the whole world. The Tyne Bridge opened in 1928, 4 years before its bigger twin in Sydney. One footbridge downstream tilts on its side to let boats through. A stotty is a flat round loaf, split and packed with ham and peas pudding. Grey Street here is often called the finest in England, and heather country begins south of it. The North York Moors hold one of the biggest expanses of open moorland in England. Green dales cut into it, with villages built from warm brown sandstone. Stone crosses mark old routes across the tops for travellers and pack horses. Ironstone was mined out of these hills and shipped to the furnaces. Alum workers boiled shale on the coast for centuries to fix dyeing cloth. That trade needed stale urine, shipped in by the barrel from London. Moorland runs east until it drops into the sea in high cliffs. One river cuts through those cliffs to a harbour packed with red roofs. Whitby splits in two where the River Esk runs out between the cliffs. Red pan-tile roofs stack up both sides above the harbour. A staircase of 199 steps climbs from the old town. Coffins were carried up them, and the steps have flat rests along the way. Whalers sailed from here, and the ships that carried James Cook were built here. Jet dug from the cliffs was cut into black jewellery for Victorian mourning. Fish and chips at the harbour draw queues along the quay all summer. Those steps end at Whitby Abbey, a shell of arches on the cliff top. Broken arches rise on the east cliff, where a monastery was founded in 657. A cowherd named Caedmon worked there and became the first named English poet. Church leaders met here in 664 to settle the date of Easter. Vikings destroyed the first abbey, and Normans built the one now in ruins. Sailors used the shell as a landmark long after the roof fell in. Bram Stoker put Dracula ashore below it in the shape of a black dog. German battle cruisers shelled the ruins in December 1914 and wrecked the West Front. Seawind keeps working on these walls and a wooded valley. Inland shelters taller ones. Rievaulx Abbey fills a narrow wooded valley outside the town of Helmsley. Cistercian monks chose the site in 1132 for its remoteness. The valley forced them to build the church north to south instead of east to west. "600 men lived here at its height, most of them lay brothers. They farmed, mined iron, and ran flocks across the whole district. It became one of the wealthiest houses in England before Henry VIII closed it. Three stories of pointed arches still rise above the open choir. Monks chose this valley for silence, and a village on the coast chose a ravine for cover. Robin Hood's Bay pours down a ravine to the sea in tiers of red roofs. Its lanes are too narrow and steep for any vehicle to enter. Houses back onto each other with passages and cellars linking them. Contraband could be moved from the shore to the top without seeing daylight. Customs officers rarely caught anything here in the 18th century. The name has nothing provable to do with the outlaw. Fossils and ammonites wash out of the rock ledges at low tide. Walkers finish a coast-to-coast route on this beach, and the North Yorkshire Moors Railway runs inland. Steam engines still work 18 miles of restored line every day. The route climbs from Pickering through dale and moorland to the coast. Volunteers rebuilt it after the line was closed in the 60s. It carries more passengers than almost any other preserved railway on Earth. One station on the line played Hogsmeade in the Harry Potter films. That village also played the setting of a 1960s police series. Trains cross a 13-arch viaduct near Whitby, and a strange peak rises further north. Rosebery Topping rises alone above the farmland on the northern edge. One side falls away in a sheer cliff, which gives it a lopsided cone. The shape came from a landslip in 1912. And mine workings usually take the blame. Ironstone and alum were both dug out from underneath it. James Cook climbed it as a boy from the farm below. Hills here hide old workings, and something far stranger waits out on the tops. AF Fylingdales rises about 130 feet as a windowless concrete pyramid. Its three blank faces scan space in every direction without moving. The station watches for ballistic missiles and has done so since 1963. It exists to give Britain roughly 4 minutes of warning. Three white geodesic spheres called the golf balls held that job until 1992. Nothing about it fits the moor, and for a few weeks each year the moor takes over. Heather covers these moors and flowers all at once in August. That colour runs unbroken to the horizon in every direction. It is one of the largest displays of its kind in the country. Bees are trucked onto the moor in hives to work the flowers. Moorland honey from those weeks is dark and thick enough to set. Keepers burn strips of old heather each winter to bring on new growth. The bloom lasts a few short weeks before everything turns russet. Colour drains out of the moors by September, but not in the most celebrated scenery this country ever saw. The Lake District is the largest national park in England and the most visited. Glaciers cut its valleys into steep troughs and left long lakes behind them. Scafell Pike rises higher than any other mountain in the country. Wordsworth grew up here and wrote these fells into English poetry. Beatrix Potter bought farms with her book money and left them to the nation. Cumberland sausage is sold in one long coil rather than in separate links. Kendal mint cake is nearly pure sugar, and climbers carried it up Everest. Hills feed the walkers here, and the darkest of the lakes waits in the west. No lake in England goes further down than wastewater. Its bed drops below sea level, even though the surface lies far above it. Screes rise from the water on one side almost 2,000 feet. Millions of broken rock fragments slide straight into the lake. Scafell Pike closes the head of the valley beyond it. A television vote once named this the finest view in Britain. Divers work the cold water, which stays clear and almost lifeless. Few people reach this valley, and the busiest lake in England lies an hour east. Windermere runs over 10 miles and is the largest natural lake in England. Wooded islands break the surface at intervals along its whole length. Steamers have carried passengers up and down since Victorian times. The railway arrived in 1847 and brought the first crowds with it. Hotels and villas went up along the shore for wealthy mill owners. Sailing boats and kayaks now share the water with the ferries. Two towns on the eastern shore take most of the visitors between them. Crowds gather at this end of the park, and a calmer lake waits in the north. Derwent water lies below the town of Keswick in a ring of fells. 4 wooded islands break the water in the middle of the lake. One of them held a hermit, and another an eccentric Victorian gentleman. He staged mock naval battles on the lake purely for entertainment. Launches run round the shore and stop at 7 jetties. Cat Bells rises on the western side and is climbed constantly. Victorians called it the Queen of the Lakes, and the name stuck. Poets worked this valley too, and one lake east of here produced a famous poem. Ullswater bends through 9 miles of fells in a long zigzag. It is the second largest lake in England and looks like a fjord. Steamers have carried mail and passengers along it since 1859. Wordsworth walked the shore with his sister in the spring of 1802. She wrote in her journal about a long band of daffodils by the water. He turned her notes into the best-known poem in the language. Helvellyn rises above the western shore and draws walkers all year. Water fills these northern valleys, and a fort in the south guards a channel instead. Hurst Castle occupies the tip of a shingle spit reaching into the Solent. Henry VIII built it in the 1540s against invasion from Europe. Its low round bastions were built for guns, and the army kept it armed until 1956. Tides through the narrow channel here run fast enough to trap a ship. Charles I was held inside for 6 weeks in 1648. Guards took him to London from here for his trial and execution. A Victorian wing collapsed into the sea in 2021 when the waves undercut it. Far south there is a place that is home to more people than any other national park. The South Downs run 100 miles of chalk hills across the southeast. England made them a national park in 2011, the newest of them all. Sheep grazing over centuries kept the turf short and the hills smooth. More people live inside this park than any other in the country. Iron Age forts and burial mounds crown the tops in long lines. A path follows the crest along tracks walked for thousands of years. Flint churches and old windmills mark the villages below the ridge. Chalk lies inches under the grass here, and someone once cut a giant into it. The Long Man of Wilmington holds 2 staves on a chalk hillside above the village. It is the largest human image cut into rock anywhere in Europe. Nobody knows who made it or when, and the guesses span 2,000 years. Its first drawing dates only to 1710 and showed a shadow in the grass. Chalk carries the figure at one end of these hills, and Winchester Cathedral anchors the other. England's old capital lies at the western gateway to the Downs. Its cathedral has the longest nave of any in Europe. Saxon kings were buried here, and their bones were later mixed together in chests. Jane Austen lies under a plain slab that does not mention her books. The East End began sinking early last century because the ground beneath was waterlogged. A single diver in helmet and suit worked 6 hours a day in total darkness. He packed concrete under the walls for 6 years and stopped the collapse. One man held up a cathedral here, and one family has held a castle further east. Arundel Castle rises above the River Arun in a mass of towers and battlements. The Dukes of Norfolk have held it for over 400 years. Normans raised the first motte here soon after the conquest. Parliament battered it in the Civil War and left it close to ruin. Victorian owners rebuilt the whole thing on an enormous scale. It was among the first houses in England fitted with electric light. Its gardens run below the walls beside a cathedral built for the family. Dukes built for show in the south, and a city in the middle built for work. Birmingham grew from a market town into the workshop of the world. Metalworkers, gunsmiths and jewellers filled a city of 1,000 trades. Its jewellery quarter still makes about 2/5 of all British jewellery. More miles of canal run through this city than through Venice. Narrow boats carried coal and iron, where bars and restaurants now line the water. The balti was invented here, a curry cooked and served in a steel bowl. Over 100 balti houses opened in one district south of the centre. Markets have traded on one spot for 8 centuries, and a strange building now looms above. Selfridge's bulges out of the bullring in a curving blue mass. $15,000 spun aluminium discs cover every inch of the outside. The building has no straight edges and almost no windows. One church, 900 years old, faces it across a small square. Birmingham built its landmark out of metal, and an island offshore built one from chalk. The Isle of Wight lies a few miles off Hampshire, across the Solent. It is the largest island in England, and shaped roughly like a diamond. A ridge of chalk runs the whole way across it from east to west. Half of it is protected, and steam trains still run on the eastern side. Its cliffs hold some of the best dinosaur fossil beds in Europe. One farm here grows dozens of varieties of garlic and sells them worldwide. Black garlic ice cream is on the menu, and it tastes better than it sounds. That chalk ridge runs west until it breaks into pinnacles, out at sea. The Needles rise as 3 chalk stacks at the island's western tip. A fourth, a tall needle of rock, fell into the sea in 1764. One lighthouse holds the outermost stack, banded in red and white. Its keepers were taken off in 1994 when the light was automated. Coloured sands in the bay behind run through 20 different shades. Marconi sent some of the first radio signals to ships from here. Rockets were tested on the headland above during the space race. Engineers came here for the edge of the island, and a queen came for the calm. Osborne House was built as a private seaside home for Queen Victoria. Prince Albert designed it himself in the style of an Italian villa. The couple raised 9 children here, away from court and London. Victoria died in this house in 1901, after 63 years on the throne. Its rooms and gardens have been kept almost exactly as she left them. Royal visitors made the island fashionable, and one town south of here grew warmer still. Ventnor clings to terraces on a landslip known as the Undercliff. Cliffs behind it block the north wind and hold the heat in. Victorian doctors sent their patients here to breathe the sea air. A botanic garden below the town grows subtropical plants outdoors all year. Around 6,000 species survive there without any glasshouse at all. The town itself drops in tiers of hotels and gardens to a sandy bay. Warm slopes grow strange plants here, and the woods hold an animal the mainland lost. Red squirrels survive across this island in numbers the mainland cannot match. Grey squirrels have never managed to establish themselves here at all. Water between the island and Hampshire has kept them out. Greys carry a virus that kills reds without harming themselves. Ear tufts grow long through winter and almost vanish by summer. They cache nuts in the ground and forget where many of them are. Those forgotten nuts grow into the trees the next generation lives in. An island kept one animal safe from the mainland, and a hilltop inland kept a record. Lincoln Cathedral crowns a steep hill above the flat country around it. It was probably the tallest building in the world for over 2 centuries. A central spire took it higher than the Great Pyramid of Giza. That spire blew down in a storm in 1548 and was never replaced. Normans began the building in 1072, and an earthquake wrecked it a century later. Masons rebuilt it in early Gothic, with pointed arches and flying buttresses. One carved imp grins from a pillar inside, turned to stone in legend by an angel. Height made this city famous, and a city in the west made its name on water. Bristol grew around a harbour on the Avon into a great trading port. Its wealth came from Atlantic trade, including a central role in slavery. The city argues about that history openly, rather than burying it. Street art covers whole walls, and its most famous artist grew up here. Fry's made the world's first mass-produced chocolate bar in this city. One famous cream sherry was blended here, and Ribena was invented here too. A tidal wave runs up the Severn nearby, and a hill inland sends crowds chasing cheese. Balloons fill the sky over the city each August, and one bridge crosses the gorge below. The Clifton Suspension Bridge hangs 250 feet above the Avon Gorge. Isambard Kingdom Brunel won the design competition at 24 years old. Money ran out, and the towers waited unfinished for decades. He died before it opened, and engineers completed it as his memorial. Chains from another of his bridges were reused to carry the deck. It still carries traffic across the gorge every single day. Concorde flew low over it on its final flight in 2003. Brunel's name is on this gorge, and his ship lies in a dock downstream. The SS Great Britain lies in the dry dock where she was built. Brunel launched her in 1843 as the largest ship afloat. She was the first to combine an iron hull with a screw propeller. Her career ended in the Falklands, where she was abandoned as a hulk. Engineers floated her home on a pontoon in 1970 and restored her completely. Docks that built ships now hold crowds, and one arena was carved out for them. The Lloyd's Amphitheatre faces the water on the redeveloped harbour side. Steps rise from the quay in a half circle like a Roman theatre. Bars and restaurants ring the whole top of the slope. Crowds fill it for festivals, screenings, and summer evenings by the water. None of this existed as public space 40 years ago. This city keeps its history above ground, and one piece is sealed inside a cliff. Bristol Cathedral began as an abbey in 1140 beside College Green. Its nave, choir and aisles all rise to one single height. That design is called a hall church and is rare in England. Light travels straight through the building because nothing blocks it. Carved stone in the chapel shows some of the finest medieval work here. This city keeps its history above ground, and one piece of it was sealed away. Engineers bored the Clifton Rocks Railway straight through the limestone of the Avon Gorge. Four tracks climbed 500 feet inside the cliff, driven by water tanks. It closed in 1934, and wartime BBC broadcasts came from a hidden studio inside. Rails and platforms still lie in the dark behind boarded doors, and England runs out further west. Land's End is the last piece of mainland England on the western side. Granite cliffs drop into the Atlantic at the far tip of Cornwall. "3,000 miles of open water lie between here and America. A famous signpost marks the end, and a route of nearly 900 miles starts here. The longship's lighthouse warns ships off a reef a mile offshore. Legend puts a drowned kingdom under those waves, and Wiltshire keeps its lost world on land. Avebury holds the largest prehistoric stone circle anywhere in the world. Its bank and ditch run nearly a quarter of a mile across. Builders raised the whole thing around 4,500 years ago. One village grew up inside the circle later, with houses, gardens and a pub. Medieval residents toppled and buried many of the stones as pagan objects. A stone fell on one man doing the burying, and his skeleton turned up in 1938. Coins and scissors dated him to the 14th century, and Silbury Hill rises a mile south. A flat-topped cone of chalk rises 130 feet from the valley floor. It is the largest man-made mound in prehistoric Europe, piled up over 4,000 years ago. Diggers have tunnelled into the middle twice and found no burial at all. Nobody has explained why it exists, and a cathedral in the fens is far easier to read. Ely Cathedral rises out of flat fenland and is visible for miles. Travellers on the old drained marshes called it the Ship of the Fens. A Saxon queen founded a monastery on the site in 673. Normans rebuilt it enormously, and the central tower fell down in 1322. The monks woke, thinking an earthquake had hit the building. Instead of another square tower, builders raised an 8-sided lantern of oak and lead. "400 tons of timber have hung over the crossing for 700 years. Fenland masons solved a collapse with wood, and Wiltshire masons risked one with stone. Fenland masons solved a collapse with wood, while in another double-moted manner, one of the most fateful romances in English history is about to create its own chaos. Hever Castle hides in the Kent countryside behind a double moat. Anne Boleyn grew up here before Henry VIII ever noticed her. He courted her through these rooms and gardens for years. That marriage broke England away from the Catholic Church entirely. An American millionaire bought the place in 1903 and spent a fortune on it. A lake was dug and Italian gardens planted here, but money built one of the most audacious houses ever built in England further away. Castle Howard is not a castle at all, but a Baroque palace in Yorkshire. A painted dome crowns it, the first ever raised over a private house in England. Its designer was a playwright who had never designed a building in his life. An earl hired him anyway on the strength of conversation alone. It worked so well that he went straight on to build Blenheim Palace. Fire tore through the centre in 1940 and left the dome open to the sky. Rebuilding took 2 decades. The next one you'll see is one of the finest and most complete medieval castles in England. Warwick Castle rises on a cliff above the River Avon in the Midlands. William the Conqueror threw up the first fort here in 1068. Its towers and battlements went up in the 14th century. One Earl of Warwick made and unmade kings during the Wars of the Roses. History has remembered him ever since simply as the Kingmaker. Later owners softened the inside into a comfortable, stately home. Capability, Brown laid out the whole park below the walls. This castle was built for defence and then comfort, and one city built purely for pleasure. Bath is the only whole city in England on the UNESCO World List. Britain has one set of natural hot springs, and they rise here. Romans built a temple and bathing complex around the steaming water. Their baths still fill with green water under the Georgian streets above. Georgian society came to drink that water and be seen doing it. Architects raised a city of golden limestone in curves and terraces. Sally Lunn's bun has been baked in one of the oldest houses here since the 1680s. Jane Austen lived in these streets, and the grandest terrace of all lies uphill. The Royal Crescent curves 30 houses into one enormous arc of golden stone. A 114 columns run along the front of them. Builders finished it in the 1770s for fashionable buyers. Its wide front lawn drops away toward the city below. Buyers purchased a length of facade and built whatever they liked behind. That gives the crescent one face at the front and chaos behind. One house now works as a museum of Georgian life. Stone here was cut for show, and older stone downhill was cut for heaven. Bath Abbey was the last of the great English Gothic churches. Its west front shows carved angels climbing ladders toward heaven. A bishop said he had dreamed that image before building began. Some of the angels on those ladders are climbing back down. Huge windows fill the inside with light through fan vaulting. Thousands of memorial stones cover the whole floor underfoot inside. The hot springs beneath the city now heat the building. Water warms the abbey from below, and it drops over a curved weir nearby. Pulteney Bridge carries shops along both sides across the River Avon. Only a handful of bridges in the world are built that way. Its designer copied the idea from bridges in Florence and Venice. From the water, it looks like a row of Georgian houses. A curved weir drops below it in 3 broad steps. Engineers rebuilt that weir in the 60s for flood control. Shopkeepers have altered the bridge so often that little original work survives. George and Bath polished everything it touched, but couldn't reach the most dramatically sited fortresses in the country. Bamburgh Castle crowns a black outcrop of rock above miles of golden sand. Anglo-Saxon kings ruled all Northumbria from this rock for centuries. Northumbria was one of the most powerful and learned kingdoms in Europe. A fortress has held the site for over 1400 years. It became the first castle in England to fall to gunpowder artillery. Guns brought its walls down during the Wars of the Roses. One Victorian industrialist bought the ruin and rebuilt it completely. Two islands are visible from the walls, and the tide cuts one off twice a day. Holy Island lies just off the Northumberland coast, at the top of England. Warning signs and a wooden refuge box on stilts mark the crossing. Drivers still misjudge the tide and lose their cars to the sea. Irish monks founded a monastery here in the 630s. It became the base for spreading Christianity across northern England. Monks are said to have made mead here, and a winery on the island still does. Bottles of Lindisfarne mead leave the island by the crate. Pilgrims still walk the sands barefoot toward Lindisfarne Priory at the far end. Red sandstone ruins mark where the first monastery once worked. A single rib of a fallen crossing tower still arches over the nave. People call it the Rainbow Arch, and it holds up nothing at all. Monks here made the Lindisfarne Gospels around the year 700. Vikings landed in 793, killed or enslaved the community, and stripped the church. That raid horrified Christian Europe and is counted as the start of the Viking Age. Survivors fled with their saint and their book, and later builders robbed these stones. Lindisfarne Castle perches on a pyramid of rock at the island's edge. Builders raised it in the 1550s from stone taken out of the priory. Soldiers watched the coast from it for 300 years. One magazine owner bought it in 1901 and had an architect turn it into a house. Its rooms are cramped, low and arranged around the shape of the rock. Windows here look out over mudflats, and hundreds of animals haul out below them. Grey seals gather in hundreds on the sandbars around the island. They are the largest carnivore breeding anywhere in Britain today. Bulls can weigh as much as a small car by the end of the season. Their calling carries across still water and sounds almost like singing. Sailors are said to have taken that sound for drowned souls. Pups are born white and cannot swim for their first 3 weeks. Mothers feed them milk so heavy with fat that they triple in weight. Black-tailed godwits stalk the mudflats on long legs through the colder months. Their bills are straight and long enough to reach worms buried in mud. Flocks live together and flash black and white bars along their wings. The reserve here is one of the most important wader sites on this coast. Birds arrive here from Iceland and stay until the spring. Numbers on the flats run into the thousands at the peak. They probe by feel, because the bill tip can sense movement underground. Mud feeds the flocks here, and a castle inland feeds a different kind of crowd. Alnwick Castle is the second largest inhabited castle in England. The Percy family has held it for more than 700 years. Normans founded it here to guard the border with Scotland. Grim walls outside hide state rooms filled with paintings and treasure. Film crews use the courtyard for broomstick lessons at Hogwarts. Downton Abbey borrowed the place as well, and visitors arrive all year. A garden beside it grows only plants that can kill, behind locked gates. Northern lords built to keep enemies out, but still couldn't make it as famous as one of the most powerful symbols of England. The White Cliffs of Dover rise as much as 350 feet. France is 21 miles away and visible on a clear day. Chalk here is made from countless tiny sea creatures pressed together. Erosion keeps shearing the face away and keeps it brilliant white. Generations of travellers took these cliffs as the first sight of home. In wartime, they became the edge of a country facing occupied Europe. A song about bluebirds over them carried that feeling around the world. Tunnels honeycomb the chalk beneath, and a fortress above has guarded the crossing for centuries. Dover Castle is the largest castle in England by area. Henry II built the Great Stone Keep in the 1180s. A Roman lighthouse still rises inside the walls beside a Saxon church. That lighthouse is one of the tallest Roman structures left in Britain. Tunnels were cut into the chalk below during the Napoleonic Wars. Commanders directed the Dunkirk evacuation from those tunnels in 1940. "300,000 men came off the beaches in 9 days. Orders left from under this hill, and a light along the cliffs sent signals by radio. South Foreland Lighthouse is a square white tower on the cliffs northeast of town. It was the first lighthouse anywhere to be lit by electricity. That happened in 1858, decades before most houses had any power. The light warned ships off the Goodwin Sands just offshore. Those sands have swallowed hundreds of vessels over the centuries. Marconi ran his first ship-to-shore radio experiments from this tower. Messages crossed the water to a lightship and then to France. Radio left England from this cliff, but the stones on Salisbury Plain left behind something far older. Stonehenge rises alone on the open grass of Salisbury Plain. People raised it around 4,500 years ago. They left no writing, and nobody knows what they called it. Its largest sarsen stones weigh more than 25 tons each. Builders hauled those stones about 20 miles across open country. Smaller blue stones came from Welsh mountains nearly 150 miles away. The circle frames the sunrise at midsummer and the sunset at midwinter. Crowds still gather at dawn on the longest day to watch it happen. This is England, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of the Transylvania, check out this video.